the chief editor of the Dary Almanac and church political activists in Moscow, Russia, whom I had the privilege to know already for a number of years. Today we're going to have quite an interesting presentation about the current affairs of the Russian church in the modern Russian context. Perhaps it's going to be an overview of the process of rebuilding of church structures in the past 25 years, an overall assessment of where it's all at the present. But without being too wordy, I'm passing the microphone to Sergei, and he will talk to us and hopefully show some pictures as well. Sergei, your turn.
Yes, thank you, Father. It's rather difficult to present the sort of general overview of the last 30 years of the developments in the Russian Orthodox Church for those who are outside Russia, and we have different contexts. Our post-Soviet context and sort of post-Yeltsin's context, and now post-Patriarch Alexis the second context. Please feel free to interrupt me and maybe clarify something if I will be too sort of Russian-centric. I don't know. The idea of this lecture, of this presentation, is to give the general overview from a personal perspective. I prepared a few slides for you, and they could be sort of rather sort of, I don't know, academic, but in fact, this is just a few notes for me to keep the sort of plan. So I'm going to speak about the last 35 years of the history of my church. And just a few words about myself. I was baptized in 1989, and very shortly I joined the parish of Saint Patriarch Tikhon, and that was the first church returned back to parishioners in Moscow region, in the city of Klin, in the town of Klin, 70 kilometers from Moscow. And that was also the first church in that time still Soviet Russia, dedicated to the confessor and I believe a martyr, new martyr of our church. Then we very shortly we established a brotherhood, St. Tikhon's Brotherhood, and that was a youth initiative. We have a few branches, actually, one in Klin, the second in Moscow, and the third in Chicago, which existed for just a few months, but that was very inspiring for us in the Soviet Union and sort of first years in post-Soviet Russia. Then I was an activist and the chairman of this brotherhood. Then in 1994, when our synod forced brotherhoods to sort of change actually their position from sort of semi-independent activities to parish activities, we in fact closed our brotherhood. I became a journalist and started a religious news agency. Then I was involved in a few independent television and internet-based Orthodox Christian media projects. And then in 2001, I was invited to reorganize the official newspaper of the Moscow Patriarchate, Церковный Вестник, Church Herald. And later in 2009, when Kirill became Patriarch of Moscow, he appointed me as the executive editor of the Journal of Moscow Patriarchate. Then and I was in this position until 2015. Then I was fired from this position because I started to in my public lectures and presentations, analyze the church-state relations and the situation within the church that Patriarch Kirill wasn't happy with. So, and since that, I'm an independent researcher, and for the moment, I'm writing my doctorate I'm still in Moscow, but I'm writing my doctorate in the University of Bologna. So let's start. Something went wrong. I don't know how to change the. I'm going to do next page. Which one? Now I don't know what I'm going to do with my presentation. That doesn't work. Yeah, that's it. So this is just a few points, but maybe I will manage to add some more. But first, I will give you some hints on chronology of the period of church revival, post-communist church revival in Russia. Then a few notes about church, state, and society. Then we will speak about religious and spiritual practices, parish life, ecclesiology, and church administration. So this is one of the last pictures of the sort of Bishop's Council of the Russian Orthodox Church. So what the general perception of the Russian Orthodox Church is that this church is sort of a kind of super church that suffered and survived under communists, then find its way to sort of grow during late Soviet times, raised up after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Now we have approximately 400 bishops, and half of them were ordained by our last patriarch, Patriarch Kirill. The picture is very important for the understanding of the Russian Church, because the Russian Church is the triumphant church, the church that enjoys its close ties with the state, the church that is quite rich and big, with more than 35,000 parishes, the church that preserved its structures not only in the Russian Federation, but also in many other post-Soviet states, and even in Europe, America, Australia, and Latin America. So what does that mean in terms of chronology? The most popular Chronology is for the church revival is from the 1988 when we celebrated the millennium of the baptism of Rus till 2008, the sudden repose of Patriarch Alexis II. So it's more or less the period when Alexis was the patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church. What is important to know is that though today we consider this celebrations of millennium of the baptism of Rus as a kind of pure religious event, yet in fact that was the political decision of the Communist Party. The Central Committee of the Communist Party of Soviet Union decided that the church could play more active role, and the beginning of this new period of relations between communist state and the church was this rather big program of celebrations in different cities and monasteries and churches all over Soviet Union. The church itself was quite passive in its, say, desires. So the Communist Party officials really played the sort of leading role in shaping out the sort of public program of these celebrations. The second sort of variant of chronology could be rather tragic, because we could say that the church revival in Russia started with the murder of Archpriest Alexander Min, and just a month ago we celebrated this sad anniversary, 30 years from this murder, from his repose, till the murder of Archpriest Pavel Adelgein in Pskov, it's northern Russia, on the August of 2013. So the both of them were really prominent preachers and catechists, and I would say theologians, practical theologians, and both murders really shocked the church. So, and the church revival is sort of inside this tragic period. So for me, personally, the joy of rediscovering of Orthodox Christianity in the post-Soviet Russia actually melted with this sorrow and remembrance of this priest and some other priests that were murdered in my country. Another important thing to mention is that the church revival in Russia wasn't something homogeneous. I would say that there were clearly two different periods. We called it church revival 1.0 and the church revival 2.0. So both of them are in history now, and I would say that today are something else. We should call this period in some other way. This is not already the church revival. We could say that that could be the period when the church sort of explained and revealed itself as a church of new empire, the Church of Putin empire. And I will say a few words about that later. So when we are turning to the problem, church, state, and society, the specific problem of Russia is that, in fact, for years and years, there is no real dialogue or an understanding between state and society. They have State has its own agenda and civil society has its own agenda. That means for the church, that means that it has to choose whether the church will be with the state or the church will be with the civil society, and over with just with people, with the nation. In other ways, the church is the church with sort of bureaucrats and state officials, state officers, or the church is with people. This is an important question because we have two different answers. On the level of our church administration, the answer is we will be with the state. Like patriarch would say that, of course, I'm with Putin. And on the level of, on the grassroots level, on the level of parish priests and parish life, of course, the majority, the vast majority of them are with people. So we could say that church bureaucracy now is a part of state bureaucracy, and parishes are a part of civil society. When I'm speaking about civil society, this is something a bit different from what you mean in America. Civil society is, I use this word in terms of that the religious community is not in ghetto, is not sort of separated from the life of average people. Because for years, you know that during Soviet period, the church was locked within the sort of walls of the churches. There was no opportunity to preach outside the church, to provide religious education, even to celebrate religious feasts outside churches or outside your private homes. We usually celebrate feasts behind the sort of closed and actually locked doors. Now, and the problem of the church after Soviet period was that the church actually got used to be separated from the society. It's a small or rather small community that has its own rules, that has its own vision of the world, that has its own values, and the religious community has no desire to preach the gospel, to share this, to share prayers with other people. And that was, when I was 20 something, that was a real problem because we were already ready to sort of to start Sunday schools, to write articles, to organize public events. And priests were usually saying, we don't need that. Well, what's that for? Liturgy is enough. We have confession, we have Holy Communion, we have some books, very few at that moment, but that's really enough. We are not just ready, but we don't want to do anything else. And what happened? In fact, in early 90s, we had two two different religious bodies or two different movements within the church. One was sort of officially trained and educated in Soviet seminaries, priests and old parishioners, and there were very few. And on the other hand, we had um, young people, intelligentsia, that was converted to the church, baptized, and was actually full of energy to start something. Quite often we don't have even the idea what we should do, but we had the feeling that we definitely should do something. And priests and bishops were very suspicious, most of them. So what happened? The movement of brotherhoods arose starting from the year 1990, and that was a very strong and active and popular lay movement all over Soviet Union. We had the first Congress of the Orthodox Brotherhoods in October 1990, actually also 30 years ago. And that was very sort of creative period for many people. We started, as I told you, Sunday schools, first parish newsletters, the first institute, actually the courses of catechism that were later became the institute of St. Tikhon's Institute and then St. Tikhon's Humanitarian University. Started at that time. Another institute, St. Philaret's Institute, also started at that time. And that was a kind of alternative for lay activists, because the only way to get religious or theological education were seminaries, and many people were not sure, or even there were women and men in this brotherhood movement. Even young men were not sure that whether they would like to become priests, to serve as priests, or they would like to stay as lay persons. So there was no chance to enter seminary at that time. And the alternative was to study in these courses of catechism and institutes for laity. What happened then? Then our Soviet bishops realized that they are losing initiative, because those activists had at least some vision of what church should be, how it should develop, how how it should sort of integrate into the society. And bishops were very passive. They were still very loyal to Soviet officials, and they feel that this lay movement is dangerous because they could take some power in the church. And this power is based not on theoretical or political claims, but on their real activities within their parishes and in their regions. So the Bishops' Council in 1994 decided to that was kind of a soft way to ban the Brotherhood movement. And it was successful because at that time, uh, we all were very loyal to our hierarchy. We thought that, well, maybe it's really better to concentrate on parish activities. It's better to not to build kind of parallel structures, so to say, parallel structures within the church. And we lost, by mid-90s, we lost the initiative. So the church became, again, kind of more bureaucratic in its origin. Yet at that time, we didn't feel that there's any danger in that, because the number of parishes was growing rapidly. We had, say, 44 churches in Moscow in the late 80s, and we had already 150 parishes in 1992, and now we have in Moscow 600 parishes and more than 1,000 something churches, chapels altogether. This rapid growth of the church, of course, lead to a very peculiar situation, because the number of parishes was growing, and the number of seminarians was really tiny in terms of the demand for priests. I would say that 90% of young men of my generation, of those who were active in the church, became priests. So the number of our active lay people sort of dropped down because they were just ordained. At that time, people were staying in the church, and the idea that the kind of parallel religious life would be established by Orthodox was rather radical. Of course, at that time, we already had the parallel parishes of the Russian Orthodox Church in exile. We had already some non-canonical churches that claimed to be the successors of the Catacomb Church. Yet the number of these parishes and kind of non-canonical parishes and alternative parishes was really small, and we were all loyal to the Russian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate. And that was, in terms of authority of the church, that was a very special period, because the authority of the church was sort of adopted, so to say, by, or people recognized this authority of the church on any person in with a cross, or any even person in the cassock. So the authority of the church and the authority of a priest or a monk or a bishop was it was the same authority, and the trust in clergy was enormously high, and that actually led to quite some problems. And one of them, was mladostarchество. That means that the young priests or unexperienced priests claimed to be spiritual leaders of the parish, or even father confessors that should sort of guide in all, not just in spiritual um, questions, but in all spheres of their life, business and private life. And because priests were unexperienced, lots of problems appeared, because that was not really the true spiritual guidance. That was a kind of uh, play in spiritual guidance. And that led to tragedies, because priests were actually blessing that this young man should marry this young lady. For you, for example, it's better not to marry, but you should go to a monastery. And for you, it's better to not just to go to the monastery, but to sell your property and give it to the monastery, and then go to the monastery, and so on. So, and people were really under sort of, and people trusted this kind of priest. And then this priest started to ban from receiving Holy Communion, ban for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And that became a really serious problem, so that, because you know that canonical order demands that those who are give you this hypothymia should also remove it. But quite often people who were giving this hypothymia during their pilgrimages to the newly opened monasteries, they went for confession to young monks. So they didn't remember the face of the monk. They absolutely have no idea what is the name of this monk. So when they were returning from this pilgrimage home and asking their parish priest, well, I was banned from communion for 10 years. What should I do now? He said, I don't know, because you should go back to the priest. What was your, what kind of sin you committed? And then even Patriarch kind of non-officially blessed quite a few dozens of experienced priests to remove this hypothymia from people, because that was a serious problem for the whole church. And also at that time, speaking about church, state, and society, the problem was that though after 1991, Soviet Union ceased to exist, and uh, um, Communist Party lost its leading role in the society. But in different regions, the local administration was still, I would say, 100% communist, or kind of post-communist. They have absolutely no idea how to deal with the church. So the society at that time realized that um, uh, the search for something non-Soviet leads them basically to the Orthodox Church. The Orthodox Church was the only in the country that represented a different tradition. Of course, the Soviet tradition, the communist tradition, dominated in Russia, and atheistic tradition. But if you're looking for historical truth, if you're looking for something different, if you're looking for a, I would say, different Russia, then the only option is to turn to the Orthodox Church. and many people turned to the church. So what was different? In fact, the Russian Orthodox Church at that time was basically also Soviet, already Soviet. After the Second World War, after the Great Patriotic War, as we call it, the church started its kind of new. There was a new stage of cooperation between the state and the church, and in fact, all the bishops were controlled by two bodies, by the Committee for Совет по делам религии, the kind of Committee on Religion of the Soviet government on one hand, and the KGB on the other hand. And that was really kind of fruitful cooperation, because since at least mid till late 80s, more than almost 40 years, the state and the secret services of the state controlled almost everything in the church. Of course, there were dissidents. Of course, still there were catacomb communities, but you know, Soviet Union is a country, was a big country, and generally speaking, all the official structures were controlled by the Soviet officials. So when this pressure of the communist state was um, left the church, so there was no pressure anymore. The bishops and priests were a bit disappointed, because they got used to ask permission for everything they were doing from the state officials. Now they were on their own, and the first feeling was what I don't know what I'm allowed to do and what I'm not allowed. So the state was sort of became really neutral. And in 90s, this I would say fruitful democratic style that was during Yeltsin's period in post-Soviet Russia was also, and that was also a kind of democratic spirit within the Russian Orthodox Church. At that time, you know, the Moscow Patriarchate easily gave autonomy to the church in Ukraine, to its dioceses in Ukraine, in Belarus, in Baltic states. So the idea to reorganize Moscow Patriarchate as a community, commonwealth of semi-independent churches was very, very popular. And the role of the patriarch was more like it was a symbol of the unity of the church, but not a kind of a pope within the church, within the Orthodox Church. I have to say that now it's different, of course. During Patriarch Kirill, we have now the Pope in the Orthodox Church, and we don't have this kind of democratic atmosphere, not only in relations between the church in Moscow and the church in other independent states, but between say patriarch and bishops in the dioceses within Russia, and the same is between parish priests and their local bishops. We have this hierarchical principle as the main principle within the church, and no real signs of conciliarity within the church administration or even on the parish level. We'll say a little more about it later. So what is negative in this church, state, and society relations today? We have both problems: civil religion, orthodoxy, yes, civil religion, and orthodoxy is political religion. And I will show a few examples. So, but first of all, yes, when we're speaking about the kind of church as a part of the civil society, of course, that means that priests or preachers or church historians or church activists comment not only on the problems of the religious, ecclesial life, but also comment on what's going on in public life, in the life of the state and society. And Patriarch Kirill started his patriarchy, his period as patriarch, with the unprecedented on public speaking of two famous priests in Russian Federation. One of them is Archpriest Georgy Mitrofanov, professor of St. Petersburg Spiritual Academy. And the second one is Igumen Peter Mesherinov, the monk in Danilov Monastery in Moscow. They were very active in sort of commenting religious life and public life, and they got oral ban to speak straight from the patriarch. And they were very obedient. They kept silence for years. But then journalists managed to sort of put good questions, sort of to put pressure on them, why they're not commenting anymore. And one of them said that, well, there's a ban from patriarch. And of course, the official reaction was, of course, there's no ban, something that's kind of misunderstanding. There was no ban. But in fact, that was a ban. Now both of them are commenting, again, public life, but much more accurately, and they are much more observed than before. Also, I've just said about lay movement. Yeah, let's go further. So, Russian Orthodox Church and Russian Orthodoxy as civil religion. Of course, the idea of our civil religion is kind of mutating, and it's not that easy to, there are a good dozen of different explanations what civil religion is. But definitely it deals with the kind of unity of the nation and the idea of common shared values that the nation has. And the state in 90s was looking for these values in different areas. And on the first stage, the church was not included in this list. But little by little, and especially when Putin became the president of Russia, the emphasis on the Orthodox Church as a and the Christian values as a basis for national kind of self-understanding and self-representation became very at least obvious. It became this emphasis on the church became very strong. And on the picture we see the opening ceremony of the monument devoted to Saint Prince Vladimir, and we see 6 persons on the picture. That's quite symbolic. They, of course, Patriarch Kirill is speaking. Then next to him is Mayor of Moscow, Sergei Chapnin. Then the lady is the widow of Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Then President Putin, at that time Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev, Minister of Culture Vladimir Medinsky. What is interesting about this monument and this situation? When we were speaking about the roots of Christian tradition, it was decided that we start the history of the church and the history of Christianity in Russia with Kiev and Rus. And that was okay until 2014, when Russia first annexed Crimea and then provoked war in Donbass. So the relations between Russia and Ukraine, so Ukraine considers Russia as an enemy, as a country that is fighting against Ukraine on its territory, and that for Russia that meant that Ukraine betrayed the heritage of Prince Vladimir, and that was a battle of symbols. So the main monument of Saint Prince Vladimir is in Kiev. What Russia did to sort of to proclaim its sort of independence on one hand and tradition on the other, a monument devoted, a figure of Saint Prince Vladimir was erected just in front of Moscow, just in front of Kremlin on Borovitsky Hill. And symbolically, that meant that the true heritage of Saint Prince Vladimir is not in Ukraine anymore, but in Moscow. So that's a kind of joke. So that's a Soviet-style poster, and the title is «Скорей бы воскресенье и снова храм». So as soon as Sunday comes, I'm back to the church. But the original poster is a bit different, the Soviet poster. As soon as Monday comes, I'm happy, I'm kind of happy to be back to work. That shows the deep kind of interaction, deep strong connection between the real tradition that Russian people belong to, and this is Soviet tradition, and Christian tradition that was actually new for Russians. We used to say that we have a history of 1,000-year history of the church in Russian lands, but we have to keep in mind that the atheistic period in Russia lasted for more than 70 years. That's more than 3 generations. So really, the generally speaking, Christian traditions ecclesial traditions died out. Very few were sort of brought, very few people were brought up as Christians. The so dozens of millions were brought up as atheists. And when the church revival started, that was actually a kind of post-modernist reconstruction of Christian tradition. Of course, we have rich Christian culture. Of course, there were priests like Alexander Main, who was brought up in Catacomb Church, or like at that time, Christiankin, some other priests, and those who were considered to be starets, the Kirill, Archimandrite Kirill Pavlov, and others. But there were very few. There were millions of Russians baptized, and there was a great need in personal example in how to follow the Orthodox way of life. And many people didn't have any practical examples. Basically, they had books, they had maybe videos or films at that time. They had tapes like sermons of Metropolitan Antony of Suruj or Alexander Shmemen. Of course, they had the rich heritage of Russian immigration, but that was not a personal encounter with Orthodox Christians. So that actually led to a very specific way of perception of Orthodox Church. Basically, what people adopted were the formal rules: how to pray, how to conduct the service, how to pray in the morning and in the evening, how to fast, how to confess, and basically that's it. The true spirit of the church was almost lost. And especially that was a problem for many monastic communities that were re-established in different areas of Russia. Young people were tonsured as monks, but they never received true spiritual guidance. And now we have thousands of monks that had no spiritual, young, and today they think that they are good monks, they are good priests, they are good father confessors, but in fact they're not, because the Orthodox tradition that they belong to is an artificial tradition that was reconstructed basically as sort of the formal elements were reconstructed, and the spirit of the gospel is not there. So that's my main point. What next is, if there is no spirit of of Christ, of gospel, then what we have instead of that? This place could not be empty. And we have the answer. Because Soviet society was kind of highly ideological society, we have, instead of spiritual life, we have ideological life. We have ideology instead of instead of Orthodox spirituality. And that means that history took the place of theology. We didn't manage to revive any theological schools or provide serious and deep theological research in Russia. None in seminaries, none in spiritual academies, but we have good church historians, and we even have the biggest national project suggested by the church, now by Metropolitan Tikhon Shevkunov, called Russia, My History. And this is the representation of the history of Russia, of course, sort of both political, social history and ecclesial history, as on the first stage as temporary exhibitions. And now we have this multimedia exhibitions in 17 big cities of Russia as separate state-financed museums. So the church actually became the official interpreter of Russian history, not just for believers, for Christians, but also for the state. The state recognized the role of the church as an interpreter of, as true interpreter of Russian history. And all the discussions, all the battles that we have now within the church are the battles about Russian history. And one of these battles is just taking place right now. And I would say that the key question for the church is what was the role in of the church in relations to the state from 1920s, say, to 1960s. That's the question of Sergianstva. That's I don't know how to whether you're aware of that or not, but the heritage of the patriarch Sergei Stargorodsky, who in fact took the leading role in the church by force in late 20s, and then 1944 became patriarch and soon died. He was extremely loyal to the communist state. His idea was to save the church by surrendering to the demands of the communists. But that was not the only line within the church. Quite a few bishops were openly against this position, and they were insisting that the church should not cooperate with atheistic state. And there's no reason to be afraid that the church will disappear, because God himself will preserve his church. So almost 100% of members of this, say, ecclesial party were in Gulag, died in Gulag, or were killed by communists. So they didn't survive by early 40s. And the only firm stand was the stand of Patriarch Sergei. And when he finally met with Stalin in September 1943, and the new church actually was established, and that was this church took the name of the Russian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchate. We still feel that all the bishops, including Patriarch Kirill, they are followers of Patriarch Sergei. And now, when we know the history of the church quite well, and we have the documents in Russian of this critique of the Patriarch, of the position of Patriarch Sergei, now is well known, and the opposition to Patriarch, some members even of the opposition to Patriarch Sergei were canonized as new martyrs. The vision of the church in the 20th century is changing. And the mode that this vision is changing is that the main question is that how close should be the church to the state? And the general answer is that, well, it's quite simple. During its history, the church in Russia was always with the state. And now we can say that the church was not only with the state during the period of Russian Empire, when the Orthodoxy was state religion, but the church was with the state also during Soviet period, when the state was atheistic. And there's no problem for the church. It's okay, because that's the only mode the church exists in history, that in Russia, that the church is always with the state. And of course, there are voices against that, because we know not only the advantages of this position, but we have lots of, now we know, disadvantages. And I would say that that will lead soon, very soon, that will lead the church to a deep crisis, because as I said, the church is with the state, and the society in Russia is quite suspicious, at least quite suspicious of the state, very, very critical. And that means that people are becoming more and more suspicious towards the church, and they're trying to keep away from the church that is always with the state, especially young people. If he will talk to those who are 15, 20, 25, they would say that we're not happy with the Orthodox Church, because we see that the church is always blessing the state, and we feel that there's a certain danger that the state brings to us. Wars are suppression of dissidents and activists, and though even peaceful protests that we had, for example, last year in Moscow, the state is very cruel to civil activists. The idea is that say no to the church, to the state at all. You just have to be happy with everything the state is doing. And that's impossible, especially for young people. And when the church is on the side of the state, the church, to be Orthodox becomes more and more unpopular. And I don't know what to do with that. Now, when we're speaking about Orthodox Church as a political religion, we are speaking not about the nation and values. We are speaking about the state and how the state reacts to different political and cultural challenges with certain religious background. I would say that Orthodoxy became clearly a political religion in Russia when the Pussy Riot danced in Christ the Savior Cathedral. The problem was the following, that they performed a song, a provocative song, that was actually a prayer. And the prayer was very simple. Богородица Putina прогони, Mother of God, cast Putin away. And that was a real shock for Putin, because he considered himself to be a good Christian. He was giving quite a lot of money to the church. He was very attentive to what Patriarch was asking and even demanding. And he was absolutely sure that Patriarch Kirill is controlling religious life in Russia. He is the main person to control religious activities within Russian Federation. And of course, the only prayer that Putin can imagine is the prayer for the authorities of the country. And when he realized that there could be also a prayer against the authorities of the country, he was shocked. And then he started to think, what should be the answer? And his idea, in fact, was that if this is the prayer against the state power, that means that the state should deal with these young ladies itself without asking the church. So the church, in fact, didn't participate in this in the court, in the listenings in the court, but the state did everything itself. So the state became the protector of sacred places and sacred objects, and imprisoned these ladies on its own with religious motivation. Then Crimea came within a few years, and again, one of the political arguments voiced by President that Crimea should be a part of Russia was that Crimea is the place where Rus was baptized. That means Prince Vladimir, who was the Prince of Kiev. But yet, because Moscow now is the kind of true inheritant of Kievan tradition, then Moscow should possess this place where Prince Vladimir was baptized. And then another big story is the rhetoric. I stress that this is just the rhetoric of struggle for traditional values, because even this term, traditional values, appeared in Russia just a few years ago, and then again disappeared. So that was a kind of political gesture suggested to Putin by Patriarch Kirill. Now you won't hear anything about traditional values, because we were speaking for traditional values for almost 6 years, and sort of this problem is more or less closed. We fight for 5 years for traditional values. Now it's okay. We can forget this. We're turning to something else. Now we're fighting against Navalny. Now we're fighting for for gas. Now we're fighting against COVID, and we're not fighting against for traditional values anymore. So that was purely rhetorics. And when conservative Christians all over the world praised Putin for his as a defender of traditional values, that was a big mistake, because he is not a real defender of traditional values, because he himself even has no idea what should be in the list. His main point when he started to speak about traditional values was to first to show that we are on the right side, we are on the side of God, and this rotten West is on the side of devil. That was the only idea, just to show that we have the enemy. The West is the enemy of Russia, and this is not just the political problem. We are not fighting the West only because they are our political opponents, but also there is a serious spiritual reason to fight against the West, because we are true defenders of traditional values, and the West sort of betrayed its Christian tradition and its traditional values. But now it's over. This is not his sort of a part of his creed. This is a kind of technical campaign that was going just for a few years. Oh, again, I can't switch to the next page. Okay, I'm talking almost 1 hour and 10 minutes. Maybe somewhere here I should stop. And that's what I should do. Now I will show you some more pictures. Also, this is about the way political religion is represented by Russian politicians and state officials. Extremely good, to the point quotation from the former Minister of Culture of Russian Federation. You saw him also in the picture right in front of Prince Vladimir's monument. The Soviet epic heroes, that's the heroes of the Second World War. Young Guard, that's communist, young communists that were fighting fascists. Panfilov soldiers and Zoya Kosmodemyanskaya should be treated by state and society as the church treats its canonized saints. This is my human and civil position. That means that heroes of the Second World War, so heroes of the Second World War, should have the same status within the state ideology as saints are in Christian tradition. Uh, uh, well, in fact, this is hypocrisy, of course. And the minister could say that openly. That was this quotation is from his interview in the in the main state-owned newspaper in Russian Federation. This picture I made this morning. I was for the first time in the main church, main Orthodox church of the Russian armed forces. It was consecrated in the beginning of summer, and you can see here that's really symbolic. First of all, we have the angel, and it's of course it's okay to uh, depict angels within the church, but on the picture behind you see are soldiers with machine guns. You can see soldiers with and on the other pictures you can see soldiers of different epochs with different arms, and they are not praying. Usually when we put somebody on the wall in the church, the image on the wall in the church, that is somehow connected to the main thing, to the main idea of the church, that we gather in the church for prayer. We are gathering to pray to God. And here we can see that these military men are not praying at all. They're just staying there doing nothing, but they're definitely not praying. And it's okay to put this picture in the church today. That's the sort of violation of church canons. That's that's a disaster. But what is even more horrible is that you can see the flags with Soviet symbols right next to this picture. And they were put not in during Soviet times, but they were put this year. These banners are the banners of different military troops. But the tricky thing is that right under these symbols, the church itself was persecuted. And Russian people, millions of Russian peoples, were persecuted right under these symbols. No way they could be treated as a part of the they could exist inside the church, and that's what we have. They are in the church, and maybe you remember that when this church was ready for consecration, people saw images of Stalin and of Putin on the mosaics. There was the Stalin was not himself, but also as a image on the banner that was carried by one of the soldiers. But still, I can imagine the image of Stalin only on one picture in the church. He is burning in hell, and that's the right way to represent him. And now we have the opposite. He is treated as a hero, as the one under whom, as a kind of chief commander, under whom we won, or Soviet Union won the Second World War. And this is enough. This reason is enough to put him on the wall as as a historic figure. So we fighting for history. We, in fact, as Christians, we lost the kind of sense of history today in Russia. We lost this feeling of what is true and what is not. And okay, now it's okay to put Stalin on the wall in the main church of the Russian military troops. And then it's a kind of joke, of course, again. But that means that that shows how, in fact, the Soviet tradition merges with the Christian tradition. And you will never find a word against this kind of representation of Stalin by church officials. Maybe once a few years ago, Metropolitan Hilarion said a few words, but since that, church is keeping silence about the revival of positive image of Stalin in contemporary Russian society and Russian culture. So it's quite easy then to imagine that patriarch is giving church awards, high church awards to those who provide state propaganda, and basically what they're doing, they are constantly presenting West as the main enemy of Russia. So these two guys, Dmitry Kiselev and Oleg Dobrodeyev, and their media, they're lying every day. They are telling lies to millions of people day by day for years. And it's okay for Patriarch Kirill to make pictures with them and to give them church awards. Now, what is, we're switching to a different problem now. But I think this is even more important than all our sort of everything we speak before, because civil religion and political religion is not the main problem. I think the main problem now is the way we approach Christ and salvation. And I will show you two pictures. That's really, I think that's really brilliant illustration what happens with us today. For centuries, when we were speaking about salvation, we were thinking about it as a cooperation between man and God. This picture of resurrection shows that, of course, God keeps the hands of Adam and Eve in his hands, and he's kind of pulling them from the Hades. But both Adam and they are turning to Christ. They are showing their willingness to participate in this salvation. So this is synergetic cooperation. But now the situation is changing, and that's really the picture how we claim for belonging without participation. And many people in Russia, many Christians in Russia, they were baptized, but they were not educated. They knew very little about their faith. They are really formal Christians. We have up to 60, 65, 70% of those who call themselves Christians, but we have less than 6% who are attending churches services on the regular basis, and approximately 2% are in the church every week, say every Sunday. So this is even less than in the United States, and this is less than in many other Orthodox countries. So in fact, when we're speaking about Christian Russia, we are speaking about mythology. This is not the reality. When we have the in big cities, we could have 200, 500, even 800 people on Sunday service, on Sunday liturgy in the big city. But the average number of parishioners in many towns and cities in Russian Federation is from 30 to 50. And in the rural areas in the village, they could be 3, 4 parishioners on Sunday liturgy. And that's a common thing. So parish life is very, very weak. There are exceptions, but parish life is very weak in vast majority of parishes of the Russian Orthodox Church. That's right. Yes, and just I will finish with it. During last 6, 5 years, harsh criticism of the church became public. We have a website that was started called Ahila, and this is the voice of priests from province, from different areas of Russia, who are deeply disappointed by their life in the church, by their relations with bishops. They were keeping silence for 20, I would say 20 years, but now they started to speak. And this is really a very tragic situation that there's no real conversation between priests and bishops in many, many dioceses. Bishops consider their priests as slaves. They could move them from one parish to another. They could move them from the city to the countryside, knowing that this priest has a family and many children, and there's no way to, if he has to be a dean in a small village, that means that the children won't be able to attend the church if they will move with this priest to the place where of his appointment. And there is no way for a parish to defend the priest, to say that we would like to have this priest in our parish. We are satisfied with this priest and we would like to defend him. No way to defend a priest. The will of bishop is is absolute. What bishop decided will be definitely done. And the same with bishops. When patriarch makes decisions, bishops are moved from one diocese to another with any notification. I talked to quite a few bishops during last 3-4 years. They say that none of them receive official a letter that he's moved from one place to another in advance. The main source for this new appointments is the website of Moscow Patriarchy. They have to go to this website after the session of Holy Synod, and they will find information there, whether they are moved to another place or they could continue their service in the diocese where they are. And that's really that's very painful because there are no canonic mechanisms to defend anything. The will of higher authority is absolute, and you can do nothing. And that is why the despair is not only among young people who are not happy with this closed ties between church and state. The despair is even within the church, between parishioners and priests, because they feel unsafe, they feel unstable, they feel a kind of threat from their bishops, they feel threat from the patriarch, and nobody can tell how to change that. We are again in deep crisis after this more than 30 years of so-called religious revival. We are again in a very deep crisis. But there is a serious difference. The crisis of the church in late Soviet times was because the church was kind of directed by the Soviet KGB officers. And now this kind of administration is within the church. Nobody is outside. Nobody is kind of suppressing the church. There are no recommendations from state officials or from KGB, from FSB, but the general atmosphere is almost the same. So my focus during this presentation was on negative aspects of the life of the church. But of course, we are still in the church. We hope that Christ is with us, though we feel insecure and unsafe, and we can't imagine how to change this situation in future. We don't have any clear plan for that. We suffer, and I'm speaking not only from, this is not my just individual position, but every day I'm talking to priests and to lay activists, and they all have the same feeling of despair and a kind of feeling that we are in the dead end. And yet we have hope, but we don't know where the help will come from. So thank you. That's a kind of my confession. If you have questions, please.
Sergei, thank you very much for your presentation. we already have some questions now. We're opening a panel, so all of our guests are able to ask you any questions that they want. But we'll start. I think you could see a chart on your right-hand side if you have
Yeah,
the chat
let
window
me,
open.
yeah.
All right.
Okay.
I could read it. In your opinion, what could be done to make churches in Russia more attractive for younger people?
Yes. Well, the first is that I think I would say even the main point is that the church should be more um, the church. Of course, when I'm saying the church, we should be more concentrated on prayer and uh, personal relations with God. Prayer as a dialogue with God Himself. Because for the moment, the main and the only accent is on church attendance, sin, confession, um, fasting, and all other formal things. Of course, they are important, but when you're putting them on the first place for years and years, uh, uh, you can't be convincing because questions that people have about their spiritual life, the purpose of life, their place in the world, uh, they are very different. They are you can't say that, well, attend the church every Sunday and fast for every for all for long fasts. Keep fasting, and the answer will come automatically. No, personal relation with God is something different, and priests are not ready to talk about that with young people. And somehow God is removed from their religious life. And many priests even don't care about that. So I would say that all the accents in religious life should be different. Of course, there are priests who are not only in Moscow, in St. Petersburg. I know quite a few priests all over the country who are doing their best, trying to um, support young people in their prayer experience. But again, we have lots of problems in this area. One of them is the problem of language, because Church Slavonic is, we feel now that Church Slavonic is not the language of prayer for young people, because they do not understand this language. And you can't feel kind of, you can't feel comfortable with prayer or familiar with prayer when you are forced to use something you can't understand. And I would say there are some good developments in this area. More and more priests are using Russian language in liturgical services, and even some bishops are encouraging priests to use Russian language. At least parts of services could be in Russian. But this is also a question of private prayer, because the question is not just the question of translation from Church Slavonic into Russian. Uh, we urgently need new prayers that will reflect the needs and the kind of the fears and the worries of people today. And the life of society changed a lot, and the prayer written in the 4th or 12th century, even if it is translated into um, brilliant Russian, won't help people. But that's a long story. So what else? Father Ilya helped me.
Next question. You said there was a short period of hope, but soon the church again became more bureaucratic. What would be your theoretical explanation to expect such a transformation?
Well, that's the problem of my generation. We could not expect that. And we noticed that the church became bureaucratic too late. So we don't know what to do with that. We just, we feel that it should be different, but that's the way Patriarch Kirill reformed the Orthodox Church in Russia, so that the number of those who are hired by Patriarchate itself, dioceses, and parishes grew up significantly 10 years ago, and this is a kind of a very strong social group with its own interests, and the interests of church bureaucracy is not are not the interests of the church, are not the interests of parishioners. So we have this conflict, and it seems to me that the gap between church bureaucracy and parishes will continue to grow. That's what I can say today. So the third question is, while we got Mladostarchestvo, but we did not observe Mlada reformers. Why? In other words, why more reasonable modern-day priests do not present an alternative to the traditional church? Good question. On one hand, we do have priests that are trying to even introduce some, I would say accurately, changes to the way they celebrate the liturgy. For example, you know that on one hand, the canonical regulations in the Russian Orthodox Church about the frequency of Holy Communion, the last document was issued in mid 1930s, and the way the Holy Synod answered this question was that lay people should receive Holy Communion up to 4 or 5 times per year, and if they want to receive Holy Communion more frequent, they should become monks. Of course, now for 30 years in quite a few parishes, the tradition of frequent communion every Sunday or even every liturgy they attend became very popular and widespread. But canonically, that was incorrect. So what happened now 5 years ago? There was a special document on Holy Communion adopted by the Bishops' Council, and at least, well, that's a funny document, but an important one, because it was stated that rare communion is good and blessed by the church, frequent communion is good and also blessed by the church. So I think that's and also I mentioned the Russian language during services, prayers in Russian. That's actually already exists in the church, and this, so to say, mlade reformers, they are the number of mlade reformers is growing just because they feel that that's the natural development of religious life. Um, the obstacles are sometimes bishops who do not support this attempt, and sometimes even parishioners are against these changes, not because they have theological arguments, but rather aesthetical. The best example is when one priest, actually, who was ordained Russian citizen, he was ordained as priest in, I think, in New York, and served in the parishes of Moscow Patriarchate in North America, returned back to Moscow, and became a dean in one of the Mitohia, Moscow Podvorye, of one of the monasteries. He started to celebrate liturgy, pronouncing the anaphora loudly. And his parishioners were very angry, and they wrote a letter to Patriarch. So what could you imagine the reason they used to explain that this is bad to say anaphora loudly? The reason was that when a priest starts to read prayers, choir had to stop singing, and we could not enjoy singing anymore. So that's the level of understanding of liturgy, even in Moscow, in many parishes. The aesthetics of our worship is on the first place, and is on the second, at least in the second. So, and that's again, when I was speaking about the formal religious practices, that shows that even the liturgy for many people is something formal. They have to attend and they have to enjoy singing and then receive Holy Communion. That's what we have.
Sergei, next question would be, what are the main reasons for transformation of Patriarch Kirill, who was mostly pro-Western before he became Russian Patriarch?
Honestly, I don't know the answer, but he in the year 2000, 20 years ago, he wrote a very important article, and I think it appeared in Russian and in English and in French. In Russian, the title is "Norma веры как норма жизни." Father Leah helped me to translate it.
As the norm of faith, as the norm of life. Okay. It's not going to be, it's going to be exact translation, but it's probably not necessarily captivates the meaning of the article.
So this, that was a kind of our manifest, I would say personal manifest of at that time, Metropolitan Kirill, when he turned from ecumenical point and liberal to conservative. And that was really a very unexpected turn because, well, everybody knows that he was involved in the ecumenical movement since late 60s, and he was enjoying the position of the chairman of the Department for External Church Relations, with lots of personal communication with Catholics and Protestants. And we honestly, at that time, 20 years ago, we didn't notice, we didn't took seriously this manifest. But that was our mistake. We should think of that as a real change of position, theological position and political stand also. We were considering him still as liberal, as a reformer, and that is why intelligentsia, active priests, or as you say, blood reformers, church liberals, whatsoever, we all supported Patriarch Kirill during the elections in 2009. So he became a patriarch and really quickly became a very different person. Now we say that if you had a personal encounter or conversations with Metropolitan Kirill 20, 30 years ago, forget it. He is a completely different person. Patriarch Kirill is not a Metropolitan Kirill. Just forget what you knew about him and take him as something, as a new phenomenon. So we missed this point, and I know that many of those who with joy voted for Patriarch Kirill 11 years ago are very upset and disappointed for the last, say, 5 years. And actually, me too. That's why I left my position in Moscow Patriarchate.
Sergei, I'm sorry, I would intervene and ask that question, but Patriarch Kirill and Metropolitan Kirill are too different between themselves, or was it just a political game? Was it just a face mask? Was there a really tectonic shift? Was a change of his position, or it was just a pragmatical approach? And could it be that neither mask, the one that was before or came after, is actually a true face of him? As an individual, as a church leader, as whomever.
I don't know, honestly. I don't know. What we see now is that actually two things are. Patriarch Kirill now is interested, I would say, in only two things. First is power, and he concentrated all the power in his hands. Holy Synod is almost nothing. Bishop's Council is almost nothing. It's all these structures. It's a kind of imitation of conciliarity, what we have now. And all the decisions were made only by Patriarch himself. He has, I would say, no advisors. He has no experts that he trusts. what we see is a kind of, what we see is very strange. Like last synod, the August synod, everybody was shocked with this. Uh, um, um, he was just kind of throwing bishops from one diocese to another with no um, uh, reason, um, or with very um, kind of emotional, I would say, motivation, and that's it. So we see that on one hand he enjoys the absolute power. On the other hand, we see now that he is not wise or even pragmatic in what he is doing. And the second thing, unfortunately, I have to say that is money. The efficiency or what does that mean for a priest, for a dean of the church, dean of the parish, to be a good dean, a good priest? From the point of this bureaucratic system that Patriarch Kirill built during last 10 years, the only answer is money. There are fixed, the taxation of parishes is fixed now, and if the priest is able to provide necessary money, to send money to the diocese um, in full, that means he is a good dean. If not, he will be sent as a second priest to another place, and another priest will be appointed as a dean to this church, knowing that if he will not be able to send money to the diocese, he will be also removed very soon. That's what we know about Patriarch Kirill and his sort of main interests.
So next question. It seems that you have observed a definite shift in governments of the church under the Patriarch Kirill. Do you see a possibility for similar right shift away from his style on top-down and consolidated church governance under the next Patriarch? And then there are going to be two more questions after that from the same author.
There are different theories who could be the next Patriarch, but what we know definitely that the next period should be as a person should be very different from Patriarch Kirill. That means that no one who is close to Patriarch Kirill now have a good chance to be elected as next Patriarch. So I would say that it will be very difficult job for the next Patriarch to consolidate the church, to give hope to bishops and priests. And he should be really a person of prayer and true love, at least to those who are in the church with him, especially to bishops and priests. Because Patriarch Kirill is really a very cold and reserved guy, no sympathy. As he himself said, we remember these words from his enthronement too late. But that helps to understand his personality. He said really dangerous words that Patriarch he understands. Right now he was enthroned as a Patriarch of Moscow, and he feels that Patriarch should not or could not have friends. he has a very special service in this world, mission in this world, and that means that he could not have friends. That's we thought that it could be kind of rhetoric figure, but then we realized that that's really his belief that he get rid of all his friends. He could not make new friends, and actually don't want to. And that means that he really lost empathy and love towards other people.
Also, the recent, oh yeah, but coming back to your question, coming back to the question, do you think that a different, no matter how tectonic of a shift, is possible under a new patriarch or not? Or, I don't know, invention of a new church would be necessary? Is it possible to change the mechanism that has
You
been
see,
created?
I'm very pessimistic about the future now, and I don't feel that I have kind of a vision of the future today, so that I could sort of speak of it. I should admit that for the moment, I don't see any sort of any positive solution for the problems we have. And I started actually, I'm going to show you one book. During the pandemic, we made a small seminar and published a collection of essays, «Системные проблемы православия», the systemic problems of orthodoxy. And the idea of this project is that with priests and lay people, we are discussing different problems that we face, and with the idea that on the next stage, we will try to write a program for the church. Because, well, for the moment, we, of course, discussions, basically informal discussions, of course, are going on within the church. But usually these discussions are very concrete, for example, about the language of the church, or the way to distribute Holy Communion during pandemic. When we're trying to, when we have a solution for a certain problem, and we're trying to put one after another, when we're trying to put these solutions one after another, we see that this is not a problem. This is just the solution for one problem, and the solution for the other problem is a separate one. So the idea is to bring these problems together and the possible solutions, and to write a kind of say general program of reforms, I'd say, for the Russian Orthodox Church. This idea is theoretical for the moment. We do understand that even if we will succeed and write this program, that doesn't mean that anyone will take this program seriously, or somebody in the hierarchy or in patriarchate. The idea is that we should write this kind of intellectual and maybe historical, finally, document that will help other people in, I don't know, 20, 30 years to start reforms when they will be possible. So they will, our experience and our results, they will use later. That's the idea.
Okay, well, the question. Also, the recent building program of new churches in Moscow received a lot of publicity when it started. while it was a program that definitely needed to be carried out simply because of the large population of the city, what have been the consequences on the ground of that program?
Yes, this program was called on the first stage the program 200. The idea was to build 200 new churches in Moscow. And this program is going on, I would say approximately, I don't remember exactly, but I think more than 50 churches were built, maybe even 60, and some 30 or 40 are in process. The main problem is that um, there is no clear vision what should be the life, what should be the parish life in Moscow today. Uh, uh, I mean, usually the uh, this new churches are quite small. For example, we have a sleeping area where I don't know 100,000, 200,000 people live, so that they could access this church in 10, 15 minutes. But the church is for 200 or 500 parishioners. So in fact, this is nothing in terms of sort of helping people to become sort of regular parishioners or regularly attend the liturgy. Because even there is a tradition in sleeping areas, in the churches in sleeping areas now, that people are not attending Sunday liturgy because the church is packed. And they're trying to visit the church during the weekdays or Saturday, so that they could pray inside the church and not staying outside. So in Moscow, this is still a problem, and I do think that another 200-300 parishes could be established in Moscow itself. But I'm not sure that there's a real need for building a special church, a church building for the parish, because the land is extremely expensive. The construction is extremely expensive, basically because of the corruption which is there. And the land that is given to the churches is quite often at least problematic, because good land and good places usually given for business construction, not for the church. And the church is not ready itself to pay for this construction. The idea is that the state or Moscow government will actually invite sponsors for building churches, and the church itself will invest a few percents, just a few percents of the sort of general costs of the construction. I think this is unfair. And that, in fact, brings us to the situation that the parish gets a poor quality building, and it has to repair it or repair it again and again. And I know this kind of cases. So sometimes I think it's much better to rent a hall, or even buy a hall in the sort of living houses, to establish the church, to establish the parish, start services, and then if the parish is willing to build a church building, and run this property, then it's okay. This process, with the help of the Moscow diocese, could be started. But not vice versa. And today we have only vice versa. Patriarch makes the decision that I'm going to build a church over there, and all the others, including the parishioners, saying, "Oh, that's just great, we're very happy." But finally, not that many people are happy with that.
Last observation: as someone who is very familiar with the church life in the United States, I would caution, based on our own experiences here, of the need to strike a balance between parish lay leadership and that of the diocese and bishop. To all having seen the parish council rejecting moves by hierarchy to carry out reforms, even good and needed reforms.
Well, I would say that we don't have any balance in Russia at all. Parish council is a formal body, and in very few parish councils are really taking decisions or serious decision and responsibility for the parish. Basically, all the responsibility has the dean of the church, who is appointed by the bishop, or in Moscow by the patriarch. And we in Moscow even have a special status now, and quite a lot of churches are running in this way. This status is called patriarchal podvorye, or patriarchal mitochia. What does that mean? That means that the dean of this church, and there are dozens of churches of that kind, formally the dean of the church is patriarch himself, and he appoints a priest as a so to say manager, administrator of the parish, and the parish council even do not exist. It's not elected. So the parishioners, formally speaking, are not taking part in the running the church. That's just priest himself, formally. Priest himself could make all the necessary decisions, all the decisions that he wants to take. He takes himself personally. There are parishes, of course, with parish councils, but because we don't have a fixed membership, parish councils are not sort of formally speaking, we don't know who is represented by the parish council. And you know, like I have a funny explanation about the status actually of lay people in the Russian Orthodox Church. For example, that illustration. That's the illustration of the decision of Patriarch and Holy Synod to break Holy Communion with the Ecumenical Patriarchate. So there is a decision of the Holy Synod that there is no Holy Communion in the parishes of the Ecumenical Patriarchate for the members of the Russian Orthodox Church. So, for example, I'm going to New York from Moscow as a member of the Russian Orthodox Church, supposed to be, to New York, and I'm going for the liturgy in the parish of the Ecumenical Patriarchate. I'm returning back, and I'm sort of saying publicly that I was there and I received Holy Communion. What should be done next? So there are no explanations on the side of official explanations. What should be the punishment for that? A punishment for receiving Holy Communion or epitimia. The only comment was made by the lower officer from a priest from the Department for External Church Relations, that in this case a layman should go for confession and confess this as sin. So I'm not ready to confess as sin receiving Holy Communion in the parish of Ecumenical Patriarchy. That's the dead end. Again, nothing else could be done in this situation. But, for example, my priest is insisting, and I'm saying, no, I will not confess receiving Holy Communion as a sin. So the logical, it will be logical that next he should apply, my father confessor should apply to the ecclesial court that they should take this case. And the next problem is, well, okay, for example, they received confirmation, even from me, that yes, I did receive Holy Communion in the parish of the Ecumenical Patriarchy. So they started asking me questions, but the first question I'm going to ask this ecclesial judges, how you will confirm that I'm a member of the Moscow Patriarchy, that I'm a parishioner of Moscow Patriarchy. You need formal confirmation for this. But there are no documents at all. When I was hired by Moscow Patriarchate, and I was in the publishing council of Moscow Patriarchate, I had a document that yes, I'm hired by Moscow Patriarchate. Of course, priest has a canonical document and he is under his bishop. Or even a member of the parish council could say, yes, I have a document that I'm in the Moscow Patriarchate. But an average lay person has no document, no formal document that he's a member of the Moscow Patriarchate. So all the decisions about lay persons are not valid because the whole situation is that for years and years we didn't have sort of formal fixed membership. And I'm pretty sure that bishops and patriarch himself will not introduce parish membership because that means that people will have more responsibilities and actually more rights within the parishes. That means that the bishop will not be able anymore to remove a dean, for example, without any consultations with the parish. And this is absolutely against the current rules, even the current ethos of Moscow Patriarchy. So all the lay people will be in the dark or gray zone. And I would say that real changes in the Russian Orthodox Church will be possible when the canonical status of lay people will be changed, when they will receive a real canonical status within the church.
Thank you very much, Sergei. Much appreciated. I have a question for myself. We still have a little bit of time. I hope you're not too tired. It's getting late in Moscow. And I don't want my question to sound like I'm saying something contrary to what you are saying, by no means. It's more remind me of a meme where a gentleman sits and there is a little plaque in front of him, convince me otherwise, and he makes some particular statement. Not in defense of Patriarch Kirill, but honestly, I do not see much difference between what was before him at least at the time when I entered the church in late 1980s, early 1990s, and what's happening now. I'm thinking just system, quote unquote, perfected itself. The church was poorer, the church was more suppressed, the church still did not know how to act. But my personal conviction is that maybe less his personal peculiarities, everything is pretty much along the lines as how the conduct was under Patriarch Alexei II. In a recent conversation, I quoted myself from 1992 when I entered the seminary in St. Petersburg, and my shock was expressed in the statement that, you know, we came to church in really unfortunate times because those people who are put by the state to destroy church from the inside are still in power. But maybe half generation down, everything is going to change. There was no kindness, there was no consideration. I mean, general Soviet disregard for human life and well-being. We have been, I have to say, in the rough 1990s, we've been very well taken care of, you know, as far as food concern and services and such. But interrelations were horrible. There was definite hierarchies, who is related to whom, and you know, same fear of the bishops, same fear of administration. It the perpetual quotes, you know, of course it's not in the army, but it's like in the army. It was doubly funny coming from people who never served in the army, neither as officers or draftees. So there was this very big degree of roughness. So when people, especially from Moscow, telling the stories of how wonderful it was, unfortunately, I can't say I could relate to it because I didn't see any of that. It may have become worse since. But even at the dawn of church renovation and insurrection, it was very far from this old type of cosiness, consideration, love, and such. It was to a great degree a very soulless, I dare say, system, where formal, whatever knowledge and understanding of what you should be doing and be just becoming a small piece and general engine of the church you'd be once you send off to the parish. Things that, and again, it sounds like a challenge. I'm not challenging you by no means. That you'll be sent to the parish and will be complete disposed of the bishop, not in a disciplinary measure, but in relation or as far as worthlessness of you as an individual and as a clergyman was very much apparent even back then. So my take on it would be that it just became bigger, better, richer, glittery, more fake gold, but in essence, in just continuation of what it was before. Where I'm failing in my observation, where do you think that I'm wrong? Or where do you think that
Wow.
it was adjusted?
Oh,
Is it just, does it, you know, to me it sounds that the change is observed only from cozy Moscow courts and that real life was very rougher to begin with, much rougher to begin with. Granted that for over 20 years I do not reside in Russia, quite naturally, or former USSR. But still, a lot of what you're saying now was very much apparent, just not on such a grandiose scale back then in mid-1990s.
well, I would say that the main difference between early 90s and now and 2020 is that we did have hope. I would say that we were almost convinced that a new church, a free church, is absolutely possible, but not just absolutely possible in Russia. That we are building a free church in Russia, and we will definitely succeed. That was the idea 30 years ago. And now we feel, and I see what's the difference between me when I was 20 and those who are 20 today. They have no hope. They see that the church uh, uh, that the freedom for the church is not a value, is not a kind of task. That the church is happy to be with the state and to be the servant of the state. This is not even under discussion. It's just like that. And uh, people do not. People lost their hope. For example, I talked to a priest who is 65, 67 now, and he was ordained in late 90s. And he said, when and he's a lecturer in provincial seminary, and he told me once that when a young man approached him with a question whether I should go to the seminary and prepare myself for priesthood, he said that for the last 5 years, my answer is no. Just stay as lay person, try to get a good education, be a member of the church, be active in the church if you want, but the church is so different now that from from the church we know in 90s, that even I myself will not sort of do the same if I will have this choice today. So he is trying to convince young people not to be linked closely with the church, because the church will not support this. Its members will not support the priest if they will have any problems, psychological, material, any kind of problems. The church will say, okay, just go, you will be defrocked. And many priests left actually their place. We have dozens of priests who are doctors now, or managers, or kind of consultants, kind of psychology whatsoever. And there are scandals that some priests are leaving the church, and much more priests are leaving the church without any scandals, just silently. They say we're just fed up with that, and I think that soon we will have a kind of thick book of confessions of these former priests. The main difference between late 80s, early 90s, and today is that today there is no hope for quick and positive developments within the church.
But inadvertently, you're just confirming what you're saying. Back then there was hope, but there was no firm knowledge. Hope was because it was one big unknown. Now we know that that type of development is not going to bring, at least quick positive results, if any. Back then, the same vector of the development was already in place. However, just because nobody knew how it's going to play out, there was more hope. But essentially, reality was the same. Would you agree with that or not? Looking back, we know that, what we're doing was, in a sense, if not doomed, but not perfect. Back then, there was just no knowledge, so we just did not know. Curiously enough, since you mentioned about the priest, I'll share a bit of personal information. Since I came to church from a really non-religious family, and my mom was frantic about me as the only son and wanted to help me somehow, she found an access. He was not a priest, but a deacon, who was deacon in St. Petersburg back then, for maybe 40 years at the time. And she knew his sister somehow in her young age, and she found his address and wrote him a letter. She insisted me writing him a letter, seeking advice and guidance and everything else. A reply came very quickly without back address or signature, but it was very naturally from him, where he, in very strong terms, stated exactly the same thing as your Conti was saying. We're talking 1991. Wonderful that you go to church. Please do whatever you can to be helpful and everything else. Just stay away. I wrote a raving reply back to him, being very upset and accusing him of little faith and being exhausted old man and God knows what else. But exactly same words, maybe even stronger. We're talking 1991.
You see, I think that it's a kind of, it was a kind of dualism in our position within the church. Because on one hand, we were members of the weak official church, weak and small official church. And at the same time, we were a part of strong and active lay movement, which was a kind of, I would say, which was in a way parallel to the official church. These groups were not directed by the official church. They were acting on their own. In a way, they were quite independent. And I think what is happening today, for example, social networks is a great help. That there are kind of now there are a lot of projects run by Orthodox Christians that are not affiliated with the official church structures at all. I know quite a few of kind of groups, and especially in the Russian social network Vkontakte. Young people are running groups like 42,000 members with a translation of, for example, services in Russian language every week, with lots of discussions, and that's the manifestation of their faith. So they feel they could do that, for example, and the great difference is that if these young people 10 years ago will try to start something similar, first they will go to a priest or to a bishop and receive a blessing for this. Now they understand that the whole concept of blessing is totally corrupted, because this is not the blessing. This is the technical, the blessing now is a kind of technical term to gain total control over what you are doing. So if I'm going to a bishop asking for a blessing, that means that after he gives you his blessing, that will be the project of the bishop, and you will be just the operator of this project and not the author, the owner. Many people now are afraid of this kind of blessings, and they're just doing what they're what they feel they have to do, with no affiliation to parishes or dioceses or some even NGOs, religious NGOs. And I think this is a new experience that the church has, that you could be Christian and you could have your own. You could have your own project, and that could be lectures on Holy Scripture, or even kind of college, small college classes or courses, or consulting, or icon painting, or some social activities. Actually, what is interesting is that, for example, there are quite a few social projects run by the officially run by the Orthodox Church, but much more Orthodox Christians are participating in social projects in kind of in the secular segment of NGOs with sort of 100% Christian motivation. So they feel that they could be Christians in the secular context, in the secular project, and they are fine with it. That's I can't imagine something like that 10, 15 years ago.
The question, being a political scientist, from one of our listeners, I would like to comment or ask, at the same time we have lost hope to build democracy in Russia. Could it be those lost hopes are similar and related? And are we saying now that there was no real hope for democracy in Russia, only an illusion?
I would say that the church is, because the church is very close to the state, in fact, the church is copying, in a way, the church is copying the state. And when the state was more democratic, the church was in 90s. The church was also much more democratic. The state became authoritarian, and in a few years, Russian church became also authoritarian. So the yes, absolutely. If there will be changes in the state, there will be also changes in the church. That's I'm absolutely convinced. But what we were talking, I was talking about now is that I would like to see changes within the church before we will, as soon as possible, before we will even see the changes sort of in the state.
But you see, looking from my outside in, and I wish so. Well, the recording of this conversation is going to be available, and I hope that more people would listen to it that are present now. But we do appreciate everybody who came, of course. That for a lot of my colleagues here in the United States of different jurisdictions, who looking from outside in, seeing those golden domes and a great number of people in churches on Sunday during brief pilgrimages, and seeing all this, what we very often lack, gives a picture almost of a perfect health. And all those things that we're discussing right now seems like something very minor, and well, who doesn't have problems, really? We all more or less stumble on the same ground of quote unquote human element and such. And people who very much tend to look at world as a two-colored scheme, for them it's either all a lie or all truth. So if churches are packed and gold, domes are gilded, that means that everything is perfect. The minute you say, well, but there are issues, you're saying, well, then it's all Potemkin village and smokescreen, and there is no substance to it whatsoever. So reality, of course, is by far more complex, but again, there is this, unfortunately or fortunately, temptation, that the Disney World picture that is presented of Orthodoxy in Russia is the real thing, and everybody who, challenges it is just plays into the kingdom of Antichrist, in which the rest of the world is immersed.
Well, I think that the situation in different countries, in the Orthodox Church, in different countries and different contexts, Russia, Ukraine, Western Europe, Serbia, North America. It's kind of more or less the same. We have more or less the same problems. What is good in Russia is that we have really a rather wide circle of Orthodox intelligentsia, intellectuals. I would say we have a lot of things happening in contemporary Christian culture, literature, icon painting, architecture, and that's really very inspiring. But I would say that these inspiring things are happening on a personal level. This is not the structure, the official church, but more like initiatives, and these initiatives are basically with Moscow and St. Petersburg areas, and I still feel that Russia is in the first, or Russian Christians are in the first rows of those who are active in the church and would like to sort of to present their faith to the others.
Well, thank you. Well, there is time for just one more question, and then we'll have to let Sergei go. It's getting very late in Moscow.
Oh, thanks a lot, Father.
Not that I want to, cut him short or anything. Conversation is truly worthy, but if one more question, 1, 2, 3. No.
Well, I will. What I'm going to say also, just to show you one more book. This is a collection of essays in Russian called Church Revival Summation. It was published 2 years ago, and I could analyze maybe 12 to 15 cases and situations within the Russian Orthodox Church from 2012 to 2018. Yeah, that could be kind of continuation of the dialogue. If you could read in Russian, I think this book is in the on the web or the in the e-format. So if you could read Russian, please do that.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time, Sergei, and for your explanation. Maybe we'll meet you again on some other topic. I know that you're departing for Italy. Good luck in your studies. We'll surely hope to stay in touch. And we'll be following you, and maybe you'll join us again on some
Thank you, Father.
other
Thank
topic.
you for your attention.
And I thank
Let's
all
pray
of
for
our
each other.
guests who have attended. We continue with our educational lectures in Russian on Mondays and Thursdays at 8 p.m. and in English on Saturdays at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is New York time. Okay, well, stay healthy, God bless, be well, and never lose hope. I guess that would be summary of the day. God bless.
Bye-bye.